Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Dungeon Mastering 101 episode. It is Palas New Cult the 26th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you... I'm going to give you an episode here. Enjoy. My DragonLance gaming series all about dungeon mastering. It's Monday. We're dungeon masters. Let's talk. Have a seat. You can run a session where everything goes right on paper and still walk away thinking, why did that feel flat? Fun isn't about perfect rule calls. It's not about clever plot twists. And it's definitely not about doing voices, unless they're like really awesome and on point. Fun is about how players feel in the moment. This is Dungeon Mastering 101, and today we are breaking down what actually makes a session fun and how to recognize it while it's actually happening. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, ring the bell, and you can support this channel by becoming a patron on Patreon or a member of this YouTube channel. You can even pick up DragonLance Media or get $10 signing up to start playing .games using my affiliate links. All links are in the description below. All right, so ultimately, mileage may vary. Everyone comes to these games for different reasons, and so how people enjoy them is, of course, very personal. But ultimately, I think we can break this down to the idea that fun is psychological, fun is not mechanical. New Dungeon Masters often chase content, more encounters, more NPCs, more lore. But fun doesn't come from quantity, it comes from engagement. Players feel engaged when they anticipate what's coming, when their choices matter, when the tension rises and falls naturally. If you understand the psychology behind that, you can make almost any session fun, even when things go off rails. All right, so what are some of the elements that make a game fun? Hey, JB, how you doing, man? Beer. That's certainly one of them. Tension is the first one that I want to talk to. The engine, the engine of fun. Tension is the fuel that drives engagement. Not stress, but uncertainty. Players lean forward when they don't know if a plan's going to work, what an NPC is going to say, or whether the fight is going to turn against them. So, how do you create this sort of tension? Well, ask questions instead of giving answers to your players. From the choices they make, to the NPCs that they encounter, to the lore they're uncovering. Make sure that you're the one asking questions as much as they are, so that they feel like they're a part of the process. Delay outcomes just long enough to matter. So, for example, in the last session that I ran with Tyranny of Dragons, I knew I wanted to have the appearance of a dragon. We had talked about it in the previous session. We've alluded that this beast exists. And the players even half-heartedly were like, yeah, we want to go find the dragon. We want to go kill the dragon. And I wanted to impress upon them the weight of that idea. Because Tyranny of Dragons, you face a blue dragon at the very beginning of the adventure. But they don't kill the dragon. They just sort of run it off. And it almost killed the entire party the first time. And so have the players flippantly be like, yeah, we want to go kill the dragon, tells me that I'm not doing a very good job of selling the gravity of dragons. Like the weight, the narrative weight a dragon brings to a game. And so I wanted to showcase that by having the dragon that was alluded to in the previous session show up. But I want it to be in a moment where they already feel pressed upon. So they're being assaulted by a whole bunch of crocodiles as they're going upriver to try to get to this Citadel of Karak-Tor. And they're already like fighting, being grappled and thrown under the water and trying to cast spells, but they can't because they're gasping for air and their hands are all flipping around and they just can't find the grounding to properly fight back as they're being assailed by these crocodiles. And as soon as the tide starts to turn, I find my perfect moment because they just went through this very stressful moment, this experience. They're finally mopping up these crocodiles, and they feel like I'm on top now. And that's when the shadow hits them. They don't see the color of the dragon. They don't even really look at the dragon. They feel the fear that the dragon emits. And that alone is enough to make them feel small, right after feeling really large. And that's the type of gravity that you've got to throw into players' faces, because not only is it like it throws the reality of, oh, dragons are much more than what we just saw at first level. They get so much bigger and so much scarier, so much so that the vast majority of the people there were feared. Like they were running through the, like half swimming, half running, trying to get away from a shadow that they didn't really see. That's how incredibly powerful it was. So delaying the outcome of showcasing that dragon, and then when it did hit them as this double, sort of two-piece punch, a jab and then a hook. And it threw them for a minute because they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know if it was going to circle back around and kill them or what. And all it was, I mean, there's actually a reason why it's out. And we alluded to that it is strange that it's out. It's going to come very much in the next session. But I just wanted to make sure that they were leaning in, that they were paying attention and that they cared, and that the choices that they make, even if it's a flippant, yeah, let's go find that dragon and kill him, now they know the actual weight of that. And that's the type of thing that you really need to do with players, is remind them of their place in the greater world at large that you're having this set in. And let them know that there's always something bigger than you. And as long as you do that, they're going to be infinitely more careful later on when they run across people or things. Because if they start getting to that point where they're just like hacking through everything and it's just super easy and they're not really challenged at all, well, that is a snowball and it will get bigger as it rolls down the hill. You need to stop that, because not only does that force them into a frame of thinking where it is just a game of Diablo where you're going through and murdering people. And that's not the case. And so you need to remind them that they're not the biggest thing out there. There are other things that are even more imminent threats to them in the area they're in. So they have to be cognizant, they have to be considerate, and they have to really choose their actions carefully, or else they might end up at the wrong end of that dragon, So put something at risk, whether it's time, whether it's resources, or their reputation. There has to be a consequence for their decision making. And if nothing is uncertain during the game, then nothing is exciting in the game. It doesn't have to be like everyone's beaten down to one hit point for them to feel defeated. It can just be the presence of a bigger, badder person or thing to really cast that shadow on them to make them feel like, oh, okay, I get it. We're not the greatest thing since sliced bread. Okay. Another thing that I think really helps with making a session fun is anticipation. Letting a moment just breathe, right? So anticipation is tension stretched over a length of time. Players love doors that they haven't opened yet, secrets hinted at but not yet revealed, threats that they know are coming but haven't yet shown their faces. And so there's ways that you as a dungeon master can really provide that, lean into that anticipation, I should say. So that means that you need to foreshadow some dangers. Literally foreshadowing with a shadow of a dragon is one way of doing it. But of course you can end scenes just before the scene's resolution. For example, every Tuesday night, I run a game on my Evil Live Play YouTube channel for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition First Quest play, right? And we just, in last week's session, got to the big bad guy of the adventure, and it was at the 2-hour mark, and these are 2-hour sessions. And so right when they finally revealed, they finally found the place where this guy was that trapped them in this haunted house, they finally got to face him one-on-one, session's over. So now they have the anticipation of it's going to happen tomorrow, of finally facing this ghost, this presence that had trapped them for the past 2 previous sessions. And they finally get to resolve that. That's an exciting anticipation for them to finally realize. And I love it when you end, and you have to do it with time in mind, because quite frankly, if I'm running a 4-hour session and an inciting moment happens in hour 2, I don't want to stop the session 2 hours early. And so you do have to judge that anticipation effect on ending the session based on where you are in the game, right? What's going on in that moment. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. Don't ever force it. But if it comes up naturally, then seize that moment, which means you have to be paying attention, not just to the game, but to the clock. And then, of course, let players speculate out loud. Part of the fun of tabletop role-playing are players out of character having conversations with themselves about the characters or the situation they're in. Always be clear whether or not it's in or out of character, and every gaming group has their own comfort level with metagaming. I try to tamp down metagaming as much as possible because it's unrealistic. When someone says, hey, how many hit points does everyone have here? Well, that's not something a character would know. You would have no idea. You only know if someone's hurt if you happened to witness them being hurt. Otherwise, you're clueless. And so it's just a little, to me as a dungeon master, it's a little odd to do something like that. I understand why and the whys and wherefores of it, and that makes sense, but I want immersion in my games, even if it's light role-playing. I want the immersion, and that means if your character would not know that information, then you have to roleplay like you don't know that information. And I've never run into a player who like pushes back on that. They're like, oh, okay, no, I get it. Okay, yeah, let's just go ahead and then. Because again, it leads to the anticipation. If you don't understand the case of every other player, then you have to anticipate whether you should help them or not, or whether you should cast the spell that attacks someone rather than helping someone. So a little bit of speculation out loud, I think, is a lot of fun. Too much can actually hurt. Hey, Harlequin, how you doing? You usually respond descriptively. You got a few cuts and you're limping, something like that. Yeah, and I mean, again, contextually relevant. So the situation that I'm referring to specifically was a character was dragged off by a crocodile in a river that was grappling them. And then they came back and they wanted to heal someone because they assumed that everyone else was also being hurt by crocodiles, understandingly. But their character wasn't involved. So, and they couldn't see some of the players because they were further upriver and stuff like that. So if it's a situation where you're standing around each other or you're in a position to witness the effects, then yeah, you'd be like, oh, well, they clearly took some sword wounds from the goblin or, whatever it was. And that type of information in-game makes perfect logical sense. But again, it's situationally dependent, and every table has a different comfort level on where they want that metagaming to go. But you should always let players speculate out loud because, again, I've mentioned this in past episodes of DM101. Sometimes they give you great ideas that you may not have considered before. Their speculation can actually feed into you putting an obstacle in their way, and then they feel like they guessed it. So they're having fun not only by speculating, but also by finding that speculation happened. And they're like, I knew it. I'm on the in. I know the inside track. It just makes them feel good. So why not, All right, so if players are theorizing between turns, you're probably doing something right as a dungeon master. If they just don't care, then that's a problem. That's a signal. It may not be you, but it's a problem. All right, the next one I want to talk about are stakes. Not meat, but stakes, and why the moment matters. So stakes answer the question, why should I care? Stakes don't have to be lethal. They just have to be meaningful. So some examples of some stakes for characters are a trusted NPC's reputation might be destroyed if something occurs that they can prevent. A character's belief or value is challenged in some meaningful way, or losing time or opportunity because of a decision made. Having consequences means that there are stakes at hand, and that means that choices matter. That forces players to not only pay attention, but be considerate about what they do. So again, consequences aren't always negative, but there has to be consequences to choices, because otherwise there's no real reason to do anything. So some tips for new DMs out there. If players don't react emotionally, then the stakes aren't clear enough. Say them out loud. If you don't rescue this merchant, he is going to get killed. If you murder this goblin who has given up, it's probably not going to look good to your god, who is a good god. You know, I mean, there are consequences at play here. So make sure that it's clear to the players. Otherwise, they're just going to play it as if they were the character. And that's not what this game is about. This game is about role playing. You're playing a different character than you, making choices that you would not make based on the character's experiences and background and race and class, etc. All right, so the next one I wanted to talk about. Hey, Chris, how you doing? You like it when the players communicate their own health to each other like Will Ferrell and Austin Powers? I'm not dead, but I'm very badly wounded. Gosh, that was a great scene. That was a great scene. But yeah, I like that too. And first of all, interacting between players as characters should always be encouraged and rewarded when it happens, because that means that the players are having a good time and engaging with each other because they care about what's going on. So, I totally agree with you. I know that was a joke reference, but the meaning behind it, I totally agree with you. In that, if a player really did get hurt, why would you not go up to the cleric and be like, look, man, that crocodile just tore the shit out of me. Could you maybe help me out here? Could your goddess heal me a little bit? Like, that makes sense. It shouldn't be up to the cleric examining everyone. If you know you're hurt, you should be role-playing that. You should be limping or holding your side, or, just something to indicate that you are in fact wounded and that it did actually have some sort of impact on you. There's nothing I hate more than someone going through a traumatic experience with their character and then not having it affect them in any way at all. Like, that, the point of that was that you would have a reaction. So role play that out. All right, so the next one I wanted to talk about is autonomy. Let the players drive. Now, players have fun when they feel like they're in control. Autonomy means meaningful choices, multiple valid solutions, and freedom to fail forward. Now, I want to stress that phrase right there, fail forward. You don't want to penalize your players and halt the game's progress because you just didn't like what they did. Let the consequences happen, but let their decisions drive the course of it. Now, again, this doesn't always work if this is a one-shot and they just want to go off and do something, and then clearly the one-shot's never going to be done. And it's never going to get resolved. So why are you even playing the game? But if this is a campaign, you want to make sure that they have the freedom to stretch their legs and to go in the direction they want. And maybe you do have a very strict railroad in mind. You can always adjust course and flow your railroad into the direction that they're naturally going. You don't have to force them. You're the one that needs to adjust as the dungeon master. So make sure that they have those meaningful choices, that if they want to save someone, or they want to save one of their friends, or they have to decide whether they want to sacrifice themselves, or, make sure that there's something big that happens. Maybe not every session, but when the moments demand it. Make sure that there's multiple ways multiple outcomes that you have thought of. And if not, be on the ball so that you can adjust fire and improv. Because they're not always going to choose the choice that you anticipate them to choose. So you have to have multiple ways to get to the same end point. That just, again, speaks to the point of you move the track, don't move the players. And then, of course, freedom to fail forward means that just because they made a bad choice doesn't mean the campaign's over. They can still have consequences that direct the story forward. You can look at my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, where I had a player inadvertently killed by another player who was making choices on the fly. That had severe consequences. And we had to adjust. So I would call the death of a party member a fail, but it was a fail forward because it provided some really great role-playing moments and forced characters to actually have a character arc and grow because of those consequences. And I would have liked to see it played out in a different way if the player was able to play some more, but unfortunately they couldn't make the game anymore, and so we just couldn't resolve it in any different way than the way I did it. But it is going to be rearing up its head again. Like, that thread is not dropped. It's not over. It's just one of those things where it acts as almost like a foreshadowing device of things to come. So how to help support autonomy with players? Avoid correct answers. There shouldn't ever be a correct response. There should just be the player's response and then you adjusting accordingly. Let the plans succeed imperfectly. They might do the job, but by the skin of their teeth, or there might be consequences, but let them still finish. And then ultimately react to player ideas instead of redirecting them. Say, oh, that's not going to work. Don't ever shut someone down. Like, say, okay, here are some outcomes of this course that you would naturally see in your character's perspective. And then if they just don't have a clue, throw out some ideas. You don't have to throw out the right idea. Just throw out a number of different options so that their mind starts working. They don't have to choose one of your options, but it might spur a different idea. So make sure that they feel involved and that they're driving it. Watch where you cast that fireball. That would be a perfect example of, to that note, harming your friends with friendly fire. I've run into many Advanced Dungeons & Dragons games where people fire into melee and they actually hit their friends accidentally. Even in 2nd edition, I've had it happen. It's not something that happens all the time, but it is something that can happen, especially in AD&D 1st and 2nd edition. And so I love to let the dice dictate. If you're going to do it, you know the potential consequences. Let's find out what they are. You cannot cast electricity into or near water with good effects. Right. Think of the environment. All right, so another one I wanted to do. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me wrap this last one up. When players feel railroaded, fun collapses, even if the story is good. So even if players, like if you're hit by a friendly arrow inadvertently because you were in melee and the ranged attacker decided to throw that arrow down range, you shouldn't have the reaction of screaming at the player and cursing them out. Have fun with it. It was an accident. They didn't mean to do that. I mean, they knew that it was a possibility, but it's not their intention to hurt you. So we're at a table to have fun. Let's have some fun with it. If it kills you, that sucks, but you can still have fun with the experience of it. I mean, I'd be butthurt if I got killed by a friend, but think of how bad they're going to feel. And so you're going to want to make them sort of cut that tension and cut that edge and just laugh about it. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is sharing the spotlight. Everyone gets a turn. Fun dies at the table when someone disappears for too long or someone is hogging all the attention. Spotlight sharing is not equal time, it's intentional attention. So, some ideas of how to manage it. Rotate focus naturally between players. Ask quiet players direct but gentle questions. And let loud players shine and then move on. So one thing that I try to do is, I think a lot of tables that you play at generally have someone that sort of speaks on behalf of the party. In old basic Dungeons and Dragons parlance, this was the caller. The caller would, direct everyone. Hey, thief, go check out that. Magic user, stand back and get ready to cast a spell. And cleric, stand over there, ready to heal someone. I'm going to run in and attack. Like the caller, it was declared you should have a caller, and they're the ones that directed the action. That's not really how we play the game nowadays. Nowadays, everyone should have an opportunity to make those impactful choices for themselves. And that will influence other players in the choices that they make. So just make sure that if someone has been quiet for a while or their attention is clearly drifting, pull them in. Hey, player, what would you like to do in this situation? Or what do you think about their conversation? This is something I do all the time. If two players are having a big conversation and someone else is there, but they're not actually a part of that conversation, I'll just be like, well, what are you going to do while they're having that conversation? Like, what is your role here? Are you going to stick around and just watch them talk? Are you going to interject? Or do you want to walk away and do something else? And I'll often have multiple situations happening at the table where it's similar to splitting the party, but it's still the same scene or encounter, but players are doing different things. So focus on one group for a minute and then say, all right, well, while you're doing that, then focus on some other players so that everyone feels like they have been given an opportunity. They don't have to take it, but they've been given an opportunity to do something significant and be spotlighted. A lot of players love it. Not everyone does. But if you give them the opportunity, then they can choose whether they want to accept it or not. A simple Dungeon Master habit would be to ask yourself, who hasn't mattered in the last 10 minutes? Every once in a while, just think about it. Or just pay visual attention at the table. You'll find someone that's drifting, and that is your cue to pull them back in. Off topic, but what do you think about Dungeon Craft's rule of homebrew option? Instead of death saving throws, they normally mortally wounded, but can still finish the combat scene and give last words. I only let people do last words if they're going to die. If I know that they're just not going to make it, then I do the last words. If they're not going to die, then why would you put that weight on them and then the cleric comes over after the encounter and heals them? Then you just undercut the weight of that scene, So I don't know about that. Which is why you're not running a table. You don't bring your character in. You ask the DM what you're playing. And in the sense, he assigns the role. Your job is to play the letter and be a team player. That's interesting. On a VTT, you make use of the message options to reach out to quiet players. That's a good way of doing it. Thanks for watching, Kim. Yeah, I find it hard for me if I'm running a live actual play online, then I'm paying attention to a lot of things. It's really hard for me to pay attention to chat or to take time to break away and chat with other players. And I don't know if I'm using the excuse that it's because I'm live streaming or something like that, which could very well just be a bad excuse. But what I like to do is just look at the cameras and pay attention to the scene. And if someone's not being engaged with or is just sort of being a little bit bored or something, that's when I'll tap them. And just sort of use that cue. But I think that's a great way of doing it as well, is just personally, just directly DM them, just being like, hey, everything good? You want to do something? No showboating. It feels rather silly for someone to do the monologuing when they're splitting blood and mortally wounded. Yeah. What do you do about the one guy with the broken build who tells the DM the rules? I tell them that this is my table and I make the rules. Going all the way back to basic Dungeons and Dragons, it has been a part of the rules that if you don't like these rules, throw them out. You, as the Dungeon Master, are the arbiter of the game. And I do not let players overrule that. Now, to be fair, I try my best to do the rules per the game. A rule that I regularly ignore, but I like to introduce because it's sort of the way that the game was originally structured, is that you have to declare your actions, then you roll initiative, and then you have to do those actions. And if you can't do the action because other players did something like killed the goblin you're going to kill, well, then you just don't get your turn. That's how the rules are written for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st and 2nd edition. I play it where it's much like 5th edition. We just roll initiative and you make a choice on what you want to do. Because I don't like the idea of penalizing player B because player A happened to roll higher on initiative and killed the monster first. That's not fun. So just make sure that the rules that you're using make sense at the table and everyone is going to be having fun with as close to an adherence to the rules as possible. But if you're going to rule lawyer me as a player, I'm just going to ask you to leave the table because I'm not the dungeon master for you. You know, it's not fun for me and it's not fun for the other players. And I can't imagine it would be fun for the rules lawyer. It's not the Hateful Eight. Your build should not even have a precedent. The DM could alter any and every stat on your character sheet to balance the game. Yeah, and that's why it's so important for dungeon masters to be involved in the character creation process, in my opinion, is you need to set the parameters as a dungeon master. This is how we're building characters. And if they're bringing a character in from a different campaign, you need to look over that. And if something on that character sheet does not resonate with your campaign, then you need to tell them, if you're going to bring that character, you have to do X and Y. And if they don't like it, then they don't have to play that character. They can play a different character or just not join the game. It's not about punishing people. It's about having the right fit and the heightened sense of potential of fun. If you don't have the potential from fun from the first session, it's probably not going to develop later on. And you just have to be an adult and recognize not every player and not every DM fits every DM or every player respectively. All right, so the next one I want to talk about is pacing, the rhythm of a session. Every good session has rhythm. It has fast moments like combat, arguments, and escapes, but it also has slow moments, reflection, role-playing, and discovery. Problems happen when pacing gets stuck. So, how do you fix pacing mid-session? Speed up by summarizing. You don't have to describe every single weapon attack and how it affects the enemy that got hit. I tend to do that, but you don't have to do it. If it seems to be dragging, then speed it up. Say, okay, you hit, roll damage. When it's impactful or when it's a promising moment or maybe on monster death, describe that so that there is this sense of momentum. But if you're slowing everything down because you want to paint this brilliant picture, well, not everyone's going to have fun doing that. You can also slow down by zooming into the moment. Hyper focus on the tension of the character in the scene that you're dealing with. I like to do this when there's moral characters and choices involved. It's easy to say, well, this person is beating up on their horse. I'm going to go over there and punch him in their face. Okay. However, you're a lawful good character. You follow a goddess of healing. Would you go and just strike someone without having a conversation with them first? Without trying to determine what the situation actually is? Because you don't know, your initial reaction might actually harm you as a player. So slow down that moment and make sure the moral choice is clear. And then they get to choose whatever they want. If they still want to go do it, okay. Well, you just struck someone without them knowing you're going to do it. That has a consequence. You can also cut scenes early if the energy drops. Look, if a combat scene is taking too long, for example, this last Tyranny of Dragons with the crocodiles, that was taking a ridiculous amount of time. And then we ran into these little frog people later. And I was just looking at the sheer numbers. I was like, sweet hell, this is going to take like an hour and a half. I'm not going to run this. And I just make a choice. Like, we're going to cut this scene early. And I had some of the NPCs just like, row past him, quickly go. And so they just sort of skirted past the encounter because it was a random encounter in the first place. And it just, the numbers that were there it just would take me way too long. And it would have been really boring for them. So not worth it. Move past it. You're the arbiter at the table. You get to speed things up and slow things down whenever it's appropriate. Exercise that power because it's going to keep the players tuned in and having fun. Ultimately, keep the idea in your head that you are the conductor, you're not the controller, and everything else should fall into place. All right, and so the next thing I want to talk about is, well, first of all, John, thanks for tuning in. Let the dice and the players paint the scene with the blood of the hit points. Yeah, for sure. Hey, Corey, thanks for tuning in. No problem. Read the room. I was just mentioning this earlier with virtual games and looking at the cameras. This is a skill that separates a good DM from a great DM. And signs that players are engaged in the game is that they're leaning forward, they're interrupting with ideas, they're talking in character. These are great cues that the players are engaged. Signs that the energy is dropping, phones appear. Silence stretches out. Hey, what are you going to do? Hey, player, what are you going to do? Oh, what's going on? They're clearly not caring about what's happening in the game. Rules questions increase. If you're having fun, if you're going through and you trust your dungeon master, you should not be constantly questioning every single choice. You challenge, they give you their response, and you move on. If you're constantly being like, no, my ruling says this, no matter what, the rules lawyer situation we were talking about earlier, well then that's a problem. That means the player's not engaged with the game or the story. They only care about the mechanics. And that's the least important part to having a fun game. So you need to address that with the player after the game is over, and you need to come to an understanding. So when you see it, you can change the scene. When you immediately notice that phones start appearing or people become bored or it's just quiet, change the scene. Ramp up the tension. Just do something to re-engage the players. You can introduce a decision point. They have to make a choice. And it doesn't even have to be impactful. It could be like, oh, we're walking down the swamp pathway. All right. Well, suddenly the pathway forks. You have one that's going north into the marshy jungle, or one that's going south that's skating the actual riverbed itself. Which way do you want to take? Well, suddenly now there's a choice to make. So it's not just the boring walking on a path. Now it's like, oh, shoot. Well, what do you think the chances are of there being enemies in that, in the jungle trees? Or is there going to be like a crocodile at the bank of that riverbed? Which direction should we go? Now they're engaged. Now they're thinking. Now they're having fun. Another thing you can do is raise or release the tension. We already talked about ways to deal with the attention earlier on and the importance of it. But this is where if you're noticing their attention waxing or waning, you need to make those adjustments on the fly. And if that means ending a scene early, like mentioned earlier, or adding something to increase tension, maybe it's just an environmental cue, then do it, because it'll bring them right back in and give them that focus that they needed. So you don't need to know why they seem to be tuning out or not having fun or bringing out their phone. You don't need to know why. You just need to respond to it. You're not their psychiatrist. You're not their psychologist. You're not their therapist. You're just someone running a game that they agreed to play, that they're clearly not enjoying because they have something else that's pulling their attention. So react to it. Give them those cues to bring them back in. The last thing I wanted to do is just really the DM101 mindset shift. Here's the mindset that makes this manageable. You are not responsible for being entertaining. You are responsible for facilitating engagement. There's a difference. And that means that you need to watch reactions from your players. You need to make adjustments in real time to how they're reacting, and let go of your preparation when you need to. If they're just not enjoying your game, maybe it's not them that's the problem. Maybe it's your game. And that hurts because you put so much time and effort into it, but maybe that means that you were putting your attention into the wrong bucket. Now focus on the players, because they're the ones that matter in this case. So let's have fun the way they want to have fun. You can still throw in little bits that you find enjoyable, like lore and world building and setting and stuff like that, but do it on their terms. And you're going to find that you're going to have so much more fun. You're not going to be disappointed. You're going to be on your toes, and the players are going to be engaged. A fun session is a conversation. It's not a performance. And this is where I think those live actual plays by actors actually harm the game, because it makes you think that it has to be a performative thing rather than just an enjoyment experience. So the closing takeaway that I have here, hey DCBs, how you doing? Fun is not accidental. Fun is built from tension, anticipation, meaningful stakes, player autonomy, shared spotlight, and thoughtful pacing. And above all, attention. If you can read the room and respond honestly, your sessions will feel alive, even when nothing goes as planned. At least that's my opinion. Love to hear what you guys have to say about it. It's not fun for the GM, DM. You find it's not fun for the players. Yeah. You run an OSR Greyhawk campaign with layers from 5e. As soon as they realized the ruling Trump rules, they quit worrying about the rules and had fun. I think that's great. I think that's absolutely great, John. Look, when players know that you're going to go with them, they have a blast. And it might destroy your game, but at least they're having fun. They also love character deaths because they never had real stakes before. I never shy away from a character death. And if you've watched any of the sessions in my channel, you'll know that. But it's not, I'm not trying to kill people. It will happen. It does happen. And so don't shy away from it. Don't protect people from their choices. Let them make those choices. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this session, this episode of Dungeon Mastering 101, Core Foundations, What Makes a Session Fun. I think I only have 1 or 2 episodes left in the Core Foundations series of the DM101, and then we'll move on to another one. But like I said, when I first started this, I'm starting very high level, and I'm just breaking it down as we get closer and more granular. A lot of these have parallel ideas, and that's just because that's what tables are, is a series of, and how to be a good DM means you have to make the same connections on the table all the time. So it's just different ways of approaching it. Anyway, do you have any tips or tricks based on your experience as a player or a dungeon master? Was I off base on my suggestions? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and you can support the channel by becoming a patron on Patreon or a member of the YouTube channel. You can also pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate link. All links in the description below. Thank you to creator patron Aaron Hardy, producer patron Azrael, developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz, and all of the YouTube members. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. I hope you're joining that celebration. Thank you for watching. My name's Adam with DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.